Do not adjust your brain. It is green. Don't know why. It's a surprise. Maybe we're getting close to St. Patrick's Day or something. I don't know. So good morning, everybody. Today, we move into lesson 4, what I call renewing a family. So we've had the family established in Abraham and Isaac, and now we're going to see it being passed on to the next 2 generations. Excuse me. So first we have in chapter 27, Isaac blesses Jacob. Isaac, who can't see with his eyes, sees which son is really capable of carrying on the family line. A recognition that we will recur and we'll see again in the story of Joseph. So we have this division in the family. We have Isaac who favors Esau, Rebekah who favors Jacob, Esau who is inept and marries the person he's not supposed to marry, doesn't see what's supposed to be done. Interestingly enough, Isaac is invalid. He's on his deathbed. And yet, if you notice in the text, he lives another 20 years. He asks Esau for the food that he likes. Isaac refers to Esau as my son, where Rebekah refers to Jacob as her son. Sometimes we see that in families even in our own day. Rebekah suggests the lie. So Rebekah is the one who starts the idea of lying to Isaac and explains how to pull off the deception. But Jacob seems to have no problem going along with it. Later in Genesis, we're going to see this idea of a goat and blood, again, pointing to the deceiver being deceived. Isaac addresses Jacob 7 times, and he is told that he will be honored. He will be honored. Later on, he will bow 7 times to Esau. So even though Jacob has to honor Isaac 7 times, later on he's going to honor Esau 7 times. The blessing that Isaac gives to Jacob is not the blessing of the covenant. There's no promise of land and descendants. What does he promise in this blessing? Esau's subservience. Your older brother will be subservient to you, and you will benefit from the riches of the world. Nothing about the land, nothing about the descendants, like the covenant. Esau shows up and asks his father for his blessing. Isaac says he's already given it, so it saddens Isaac. But he does give him a sort of blessing. It's not the same blessing he gives to Isaac or to Jacob because he can't. He gives that you won't have from the fatness of the earth. You will have to live by the sword, and you will have to serve your brother. Doesn't sound like much of a blessing to me. Didn't sound like much of one to Esau or Isaac either. But he does say to him, one day your descendants will break loose from all of that. So I guess that's the best blessing he has to give because he gave his best blessing already to Jacob. Rebekah learns that Esau is planning to murder Jacob, and so she helps Jacob escape to her brother Laban. She knows if Esau succeeds, both will die. If you want to see a nice reference to that, turn back to Genesis chapter 9, and you'll see the same thing was said earlier. Rebekah doesn't want to marry Rebekah doesn't want Jacob to marry a Hittite like Esau has already done. Isaac sends Jacob to find a wife in the manner forbidden to him. And he blesses Jacob with the blessing. Now he blesses him with the blessing of the covenant. So at first that blessing was that you'll have the fat of the land, you'll have the riches of the world, but your brother will serve you. Now he actually blesses him in the style of the covenant. You will have land and descendants. Esau, trying to please his father, marries a non-Canaanite. I don't know if you caught that. He married Ishmael's daughter. Okay, so this is his half-cousin that he's marrying. Because remember, he and Ishmael come from the same father, but they don't come from the same mother. And by the way, tension between Jacob sent to find a wife is blessed, Esau marries. By the way, Out of all the characters, who are we not hearing from? God. Have we heard one word from God in all of this? It's clear what God wants, but it's very clear that nobody's paying any attention to what God is saying or wanting to say at this time. They're hatching their own plots, they're doing their own things, and God's nowhere in all of this. Is he speaking? So that's chapter 27. Chapter 28, Jacob has his famous dream. That's Jacob right there. That's the angels ascending and descending on the stairs at Bethel. So far, what do we know about Jacob? Jacob is a thief. He steals his brother's birthright. He's deceitful. He hatches his plot with his mother against his father. He is still unmarried. He returns married. He returns from this scene transformed. He returns from this scene willing to consider the needs of others, not just his own. So we have a theophany here. A theophany is a manifestation of God. So we have a theophany and a response. The reader remembers the place that Abraham worshiped at. It was called Bethel, which means Beth means house, El means God. So it's the house of God. So Jacob encounters God at Bethel. Jacob was so far, have we heard anything from Jacob at all about prayer, talking to God, listening to God, caring about what God wants? Not a word. Not a word of any kind of religious sense or inclination in Jacob so far. And I would argue, not much of a moral one either. He's not too interested in what's morally right either, is he? Not so much. So he goes to sleep and he has this dream. There is it gets translated a lot of times as Jacob's ladder, but the actual better translation would be Jacob's staircase. And so angels are ascending and descending. Notice it says it in that order. They're ascending and descending on this staircase. What's the implication? In order to ascend, you have to be where? At the bottom or the top? You got to be at the bottom to ascend, right? Where's the bottom? The earth. So maybe there's already angels on earth. Because the angels are ascending and descending. They're going up and down on this staircase. Nobody else is on it. Jacob doesn't go on it. God himself doesn't come on it. Here we are now remember we talked about how sometimes God and angel are interchangeable? Here we're talking about now these separate beings that are coming up and down on the staircase or on the stairs, okay? So now we're using the word angel in a different sense. This is one of the reasons why they think that maybe this part was written by a different author, because it's using the word angel in a different way than other times we see the word angel used. In this dream, God reiterates the covenant now to Jacob. He's given it to Abraham, he's given it to Isaac, now he extends it to Jacob. Land and descendants, if you will let me be your God. God identifies himself here as the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac. So he's the God of Abraham and Isaac. He's not the God of everybody. He's the God of this family. He has a covenant relationship with Abraham and Isaac. That's why he identifies himself that way. And he says he will be with Jacob. And we'll see later on, he'll identify himself as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Bethel is the place where God is encountered. Jacob erects a pillar there. If you caught that, that's a Canaanite tradition to mark this spot as important. And promises to tithe. Where have we heard tithing before? Somebody in Jacob's family gave 10% to somebody. Remember anybody who? Starts with an M, rhymes with Melchizedek. Yes, Melchizedek. Very good. Interestingly enough, too, it's later on that Jesus says, when he's talking to, I think it was Nathaniel, you will see the angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So now it's not Bethel where the angels ascend and descend. It's on Jesus himself. What's Bethel important for? Because that's the place where God is encountered. Where is God really encountered? Best and most completely? in the person of Jesus. So Jesus takes this and uses it in the Gospels to let people know that it's on Jesus that we will see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So Jacob marries. This is an interesting picture we have here. This is Laban. This is Jacob. Jacob is saying, I want this one. This is Rachel. And then there's poor Leah back here kind of being shunned. And Laban's saying, no, you need to marry her. So Laban gives this deception. So interesting, the deceiver, Jacob, is now the victim of deception. What goes around comes around. So Laban deceives Jacob. Jacob meets Rachel, becomes the love of his life. Where does he meet her? He meets her at a well. We've heard that before. Jacob becomes Laban's servant, his intended's father. He becomes Laban's servant. We see here this parallel kind of between Leah and Hagar. Hagar is the first wife, if you will, but she's shunned. Leah is the first wife, if you will, but she is shunned. They're unloved by the person who's supposed to love them. So who ends up stepping up and loving them? When nobody else loves you, who always loves you? God. So God steps up. What does he do? He provides for Hagar and Ishmael, right? What does he do for Leah? He makes sure she starts having children and plenty of them. Okay? So again, we see the ones that are rejected or abandoned, unloved by the people who are supposed to love them, God loves and provides for them. And then Jacob starts having kids. So you got Leah's sons. Let's see. Reuben, which means sees. Simeon, which means has heard, God has heard. Levi or Levi, which means God has joined, God has attached. And Judah, which means praise. So you got these first four, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. These are born to Leah. Then you've got Rachel. Rachel has no children. So Jacob says only God can give children. So Jacob's now finally expressing some interest in God, some kind of faith in God. So what does Rachel do? She does what Sarah did. Remember, what did Sarah do when she didn't have kids? Here, take my maidservant. Have some kids. So she doesn't like that Leah's having kids, so she gives Bilhah. And Bilhah has Dan and Naphtali. Dan means God judged me, and Naphtali means wrestled. Leah, for her part, recognizes that she's done having children. She had her 4. She's not having any more kids at this point. And not to be outdone, she says, here, have children with my maidservant, Zilpah. So she has God, G-A-D, not God, or Gad, good, which means good fortune, and Asher, which means blessed. Then, surprise, Leah has more children. She has Issachar, which means my maid, and Zebulun, which means honor. And she actually has a daughter, too. Most people don't think about the daughter because the 12 tribes are what the story is mostly about, but they have a daughter, Dinah. Then God remembers, the text tells us God remembers Rachel. And so she has a son she names Joseph, which means he adds. So there's 11 sons and at least one daughter. No other daughters are named. Doesn't mean that there wasn't other daughters. It just means that they weren't necessarily germane to the account being written by the human author. So the promise of descendants sounds like it's being kept, right? Jacob now has 11 sons, at least one daughter, and he's going to have another son coming up. So the account of Jacob prospering, we get that last story in this chapter here. Jacob prospers. So we hear about this account of the herds in the sheep. Laban tries to cheat Jacob. Jacob acts wisely and doesn't get cheated. So again, more deception, more cheating on each other, trying to pull fast ones on each other within the family. But Jacob is prospering. So Jacob has many children now. So that promise to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob is definitely being fulfilled. Okay. We come to chapter 32. This is an icon of Jacob wrestling. And there's the hand of God directing what's going on. So we come to chapter 32, Jacob's wrestling at Peniel. By the way, this Peniel is a P, an N, and an L. So it's the letter. It's like the sound of P, the sound of N, and the sound of L. Remember, Hebrew is no vowels. So sometimes you see it Peniel, sometimes you see it Penuel. As long as you've got the pen in there and you got the L on the end, that's all that matters. And they don't really care about the other letters. So that's why you see it translated different ways, depending on what Bible you have, what other sources you're looking at. So I'm just going to call it Peniel. So now Jacob is blessed with children and he's receiving lands, and he speaks with God. Now he's got this spiritual sense too. The text says a man wrestled with him. Okay? Sometimes it's portrayed as an angel looking like a human, like a man. Sometimes it's God. Some people interpret it as God himself appearing like a man and wrestling with Jacob. All we know is the text says a man wrestled with him. Dislocates his hip. The man pleads for release, but Jacob says, no, I'm not going to release you from wrestling with you unless you bless me. He asks the man his name. And what does he tell him? Anybody remember? Don't worry about it. You don't need to know my name. It's interesting. Why would he want to know his name? Does he want to tell people about it? Does he want to say he has one up? When you give somebody a name, it gives them an identity. If they have their own name, they tell you their name, now you know their name, you have some kind of a knowledge of the person because you know their name. If you give that person a name, that means you have authority over them. So he doesn't give the guy a name. He doesn't have the authority to give the guy a name. He doesn't even get to know his name. So he has no knowledge of who this is. He has no power over this person in any kind of way. He has no way to have any kind of anything but a lower role than this person. So he doesn't get to know his name. But he receives a new name. So this person who doesn't give him his name relinquishes no power or authority to Jacob, but he gives Jacob a new name. He gives him the name Israel. Hear the word in there, El, okay? Israel means contended with God. So if we get into an argument, I contended with you, or if we're wrestling, that's a contention. But whatever way, it's a generic term. It's a contention between Jacob and God. That's why the L's in there. So Israel, that's the name he's given. Also interesting to note, and we've seen this before, the people that God bestows descendants on, they become the father of a nation. We always talk about George Washington being the father of our nation. Okay? These people are father of the nation, and they carry that name as part of the nation. So this person becomes a corporate person. So when we talk about Jacob, Jacob is that individual person who's the grandson of Abraham, the son of Isaac and Rebekah, the spouse of Leah and Rachel. He's that person, he's that individual. But Jacob is also a corporate person now. Jacob is his descendants, and they are Jacob. Okay? So they're Jacobites, right? Jacobites, okay? Or we could use Jacob's other name, Israel, and we can call them Israelites, okay? So Jacob has become a corporate person. What's Esau's other name? Edom, right? Esau becomes a corporate person. His corporate people are the Edomites, okay? So there's this idea that it can be interchangeable, this idea that you're talking about Jacob. Jacob is the individual, but Jacob is also the nation. Israel, his other name, is the person, and Israel is the nation. So sometimes you'll see Israel in the text, and that's referring to the corporate body. Sometimes it refers to Jacob as an individual. It can be either one. Yeah.
What was the significant purpose of the wrestling? Why did...
He's contending with, the text says he's contending with God, he's wrestling with God. He's coming to faith. He's struggling with faith. He's struggling with his role in the, remember I said he had like no faith, he had no communication with God, never listening to God, never caring about God. And now he's starting to, what did he just do? He started to show signs of it, and then he went and cheated Laban again. Remember Abraham? Abraham showed signs, and then Abraham went and did stupid stuff. But then Abraham grows, right, in that relationship. Jacob's doing the same thing. Jacob is showing signs that he cares about relationship with God. Then he goes out and does something very deceitful. And so he's contending, he's wrestling with God. Almost in a metaphoric way, the same way we might if we're struggling with sin. We know what God wants, and sometimes we do it, and we do it beautifully. And sometimes we do exactly what God doesn't want, and we do it terribly. And so we contend with God that way. We struggle with God's will. Every one of us as a sinner struggles with God's will, because that's what sin is knowing God's will and doing something else. So I think this is in here to show that he's contending with God. He's going through this struggle. Will I let God be my God? He's already blessing me with descendants. But will I live up to my part of the covenant and let him be my God? That's my best guess. Calls the place Peniel, which means the face of God. He's seen by Jacob, but refracted be an angel. So does he actually see God face to face? No. But if you see an angel, that's kind of like seeing God. And if this man is God disguised as a man wrestling with him, he's seeing the face of God refracted, if you will. He's seeing it not clearly, but he's seeing it like through a lens. Okay? That's why they call the place Peniel. Okay, chapters 32 to 36. Oh, there's the word. Excuse me. There's the P, the N, and the L. We've seen this many times, right? These two characters. That's L. Every time we see the word that has Israel, Peniel, all these L words that we, Elohim. Remember Elohim? It's got these. Remember you're reading Hebrew backwards? Does everybody remember that? So that's what I'm saying. This is the P, this is the N, and this is the L. Okay, these little dots down here, all those little dots are meant to tell you what vowel to throw in there. They're not original to the text. Because remember, Hebrew doesn't have vowels. So they're suggested vowels. That's what these dots refer to tell you how to read it. Okay, so Jacob's family, chapters 32 and 33. Jacob and Laban are reunited, and then Jacob and Esau are reunited. Jacob trips Laban, as I said, over this sheep thing he gets to keep eventually. And so then he runs away because he knows he's cheated Laban. Just like, remember when he cheated Esau, what did he do? He ran away. So now he's running away again because he knows he's cheated Laban, and Laban's not going to be happy about that. So he tricks him over this sheep. Eventually they resolve and they enter into a covenant with each other. There's a sacrifice and a meal. And then we're told that the angels go with Jacob. The angels. Who does that mean? It means God is with Jacob, and he's communicating with Jacob. Then Jacob enters Esau's land. So remember, Esau's married. He's got land. He's got descendants. And he's got what against Jacob? A grudge, right? He tricked him out of his birthright. So Jacob, trying to appease his older brother, sends gifts so that he won't kill him and his kids. He takes a humble posture towards Esau. But what does Esau do? Esau greets him with joy. Runs to him, greets him like his long-lost brother. So they resolve the peace. This is an artist drawing of Jacob and his family here, And this is Esau and his clan coming, and they're meeting each other. And Jacob doesn't know what's going to happen. He's thinking it ain't going to be good. He's got plenty of reason to think that. But it turns out really well. Chapter 34, there's this whole, somebody said it, several people have said it, this is like a soap opera. The story of one man's family. It most definitely is. Here's an interesting chapter, chapter 34, this whole thing with Dinah. Remember how he said that there was at least one sister, one daughter to Jacob? This is Dinah. She's raped by the Canaanites at Shechem. Okay? The Canaanites and Jacob's tribe, his family, are encountering each other. They've raped his daughter. To make peace, the Canaanites want to intermarry with the Israelites, Jacob's clan. They want to intermarry with them. But Jacob's sons know they can't do that. The only people they can intermarry with are people who are part of the covenant. How do you know a man's a part of the covenant? Circumcision. Okay, so they tell him, we will agree and intermarry with you if you get yourself circumcised. Then you can be part of the covenant. So they do. They go and get themselves circumcised. While they're recovering, shall we say, from the surgical procedure, Simeon and Levi, two of the oldest brothers, take vengeance for the disgrace of Dinah and kill them all. Jacob, for his part, growing in his relationship with God, disapproves of all this. Partly because Jacob's not all the way there yet. What does the text tell us? One of the reasons why Jacob disapproves? Because you've made it difficult now for me to deal with these people. So this is the story about Dinah. Again, are they showing that they're really letting God be their God? No. Are they struggling with it? Yes. They think they're doing what's right. They take vengeance. This is the story with Dinah. Chapter 35. A lot of things happen in chapter 35. Rachel goes into labor. Remember I said there was 11 sons, but we know there's 12 tribes. So Rachel goes into labor, and she delivers Benjamin, and she dies while she's giving birth. She wants to name the son Ben-Oni. Ben is son. So the son of my sorrow. Jacob changes it to Ben-Hamin, which means the son of the south. So Ben-Oni, Ben-Yamin, they're close, but so he's known to us as Benjamin. Rachel is buried. So remember we said Abraham and Sarah are buried in Hebron, on the land that he bought, right? When Sarah died. Isaac and Rebekah, well, Rebekah is already buried there. Isaac, we'll see in a minute, is going to be buried there. Rachel is not buried there. Rachel's buried in Bethlehem. Bethlehem Ephrathah. Seems like I've heard that name before someplace. Reuben, another son, the oldest son, the oldest of the 12, sleeps with his father's concubine. More soap opera. Reuben sleeps with his father's concubine, not because of lust, but because he wants to have power. So by sleeping with my father's concubine, I solidify my place as number one among the 12 sons. So he sleeps with his father's concubine, mother of some of his brothers. So now he has a higher hand among his brothers because he slept with the mother of some of them. Jacob, of course, is not real pleased with this, and Reuben incurs his wrath. We'll see later on how that wrath gets played out. Isn't this fun studying Genesis? Chapter 36, we hear about Esau's descendants. Isaac is at Mamre, which is also Hebron, and he dies. And he's 180 years old when he dies. Now remember, 20 years earlier, he was already dying when when Jacob fooled his father. So finally he dies 20 years later. Maybe, just maybe, his passing was moved to this chapter to help close the chapter on Isaac and fully have the chapter on Jacob moving forward. But it was 20 years earlier he was dying. Who comes to bury him? Jacob and Esau. What does that remind you of? When Abraham died, who came and buried him? Isaac and Ishmael, right? So the two sons, even though there's some division, come together to bury their father. Here we got Jacob and Esau again, who have been reunited. There's a history, of course, but they're reunited and they come together to bury their father. So we've moved now. So Abraham is gone. Isaac is gone. Jacob is now an old man, still alive, still going to act a little bit here, but he's moved on to senior citizen status. So now we move into talking about Jacob's son, the youngest of the 12, the youngest of the 11, because Benjamin's born later, and that's Joseph. Okay, so here's a picture of him telling his brothers about his dreams. We have some familiar themes in these chapters coming up. The older brother being supplanted by the younger brother. That even goes back to Cain and Abel, right? So the older brother being supplanted by the younger. An intemperate love of the father for one of the sons. Deception, treachery. These will all continue in the line of Abraham. Now we have this motif of dreams too. This continues. Remember, Jacob had his dream at Bethel, right, where he saw the angels ascending and descending on the stairs. And now this idea of dreams grows even much, much bigger in Joseph. Again, who are we not hearing conversation from? We're really not hearing God speaking or anybody listening or talking to him. They're trying to maybe start to do some of the things he wants them to do, but there's not really direct conversation. Now God is going to be influencing people in their dreams. God is making his plans, even when human beings get in the way. He's taking the bad things that people do and starting to use them for people's good. He saves us. He's continually trying to save us despite us getting in the way. So despite Jacob and Joseph and people getting in the way, Judah, Reuben, Simeon, those guys are all trying to get in the way of what God's trying to do, but God is still affecting his will. He's still bringing about efforts to save humanity. With Joseph, unlike Jacob, we're going to see a real significant transformation. So Jacob has his kind of, but Joseph really goes forward and changes. So Joseph's first dream, it's easily understood, and Joseph lords it over his brothers. He has a second dream. The second dream includes his parents. Jacob is surprised and ponders what it means. And then more sibling rivalry. The brothers decide to kill Joseph. He's the favorite. They don't like that he's the favorite, that he's treated special, so they decide to kill him. They throw his body into a cistern. Interesting thing there. That may sound like, a convenient way to get rid of somebody, but it's denying the person burial, which is a humiliation against the person. So they decide to throw him in a cistern. They lie to the father that an animal ate him. Remember I said a few minutes ago, the blood and the goat deception? This is where it comes back. So where Jacob used that, the blood and the goat, to trick his father, now the blood and the goat are being used to trick Jacob, who lost his son Joseph. Reuben, the oldest, says, don't kill Joseph, but let's sell him as a slave. So there's a caravan of Ishmaelites. So remember who Ishmaelites are, right? That's Isaac's brother. So this is Jacob, Joseph. So it's 2 generations removed from the Ishmaelites. So they're like their second cousins, right? And the Midianites. Remember who the Midianites are. The Midian was the son of Abraham through his second wife. So Midian is Abraham's son, so it's the same generation as Isaac. This is 2 generations below that, so they're like third cousins, right? So they're selling their brother to their cousins as a slave. They probably don't know these cousins, but they know who they are, who they belong to, so they're their cousins. Abraham's family, the Midianites and the Ishmaelites, take Joseph to Egypt. Remember, Abraham had issues in Egypt. Isaac had issues in Egypt. Now Jacob and Joseph are going to have issues in Egypt. Isn't it interesting? It's always Egypt that keeps coming up. Chapter 38. We have this Judah thing. So Judah's son offends the Lord. Judah tells his other son, and the son dies. So Judah's son offends the Lord. His life is required of him, but he has no sons. So Judah tells his other son, go and produce heirs with his wife, his widow, so that he has sons. Okay? It's a noble thing to do. The son acts evil and spills his seed. That's where that comes from. And so God requires his life of him too. Judah, the father of these 2 sons that have both died now, Judah doesn't recognize his daughter-in-law, and he sleeps with her and has kids by her. So you can't write this stuff. So the account is meant to show us, this one chapter is meant to show us how Jacob's family is being corrupted by their presence among the Canaanites. These are people who don't belong to the covenant. Their ways are creeping into Judah's family. Judah being the son, the 4th son of Jacob. Okay. By the way, it's Judah, interestingly enough, not Reuben. So Judah's the 4th son. Reuben's the oldest. Remember, in this culture, the oldest son is the most important one. It's the 4th son, Judah, whose line produces the Messiah. Not Reuben's. It's Judah's line.
Judah is he the one that his father told him to have children with his.
Judah was the father who told his son. So Judah's first son dies because he offends the Lord, leaving no children. So Judah tells his other son, have relations with your sister-in-law so that you can raise up sons for your brother who's dead. He offends the Lord and he dies too. So the daughter now, the daughter-in-law, has no children because her husband's been dead and the other brother that was meant to have children with her, he's dead now too. No children. This is where Judah, not knowing that he's sleeping with his daughter-in-law, he thinks she's, oh, by the way, what does he think she is? Oh, she's just a harlot. So it's okay. He doesn't recognize that she's not just a harlot, it's his daughter-in-law. So they have twins. She gets pregnant by her father-in-law that she doesn't know it's her father-in-law and he doesn't know it's his daughter-in-law. She ends up having twins. They're fighting each other coming out of the womb. If you didn't read chapter 38, go back and read it. It's like a dime store novel. Yeah. And yet we're still here. Chapters 39 through 41. I put a couple pictures up here of dreams. This is Joseph having his dreams about the sheaves and the stars that he tells his brothers about and they're not real thrilled about. This is Joseph telling Pharaoh the meaning of his dreams. And so if you read about that, you know about these dreams. And I'll talk about them just for a second here. So we have Joseph's dreams. So Joseph meets Potiphar's wife in Egypt. Remember, Joseph is in Egypt because he was sold into slavery. He meets Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife develops feelings for Joseph and keeps throwing herself at him. He keeps saying no. He keeps saying no. He keeps saying no. She makes up a story that he tried to attack her. So everybody knows now that Joseph's tried to attack Potiphar's wife. Potiphar finds this out. Potiphar has Joseph thrown into prison. Joseph didn't do anything except incur the wrath of a woman. Potiphar's wife is chasing him, so he's in prison. In prison, he hears these two people he's in prison with, their dreams. So again, Joseph, more dreams now. The butler, the former butler of Potiphar, of the Pharaoh, has a dream that Joseph interprets as the butler being returned to the palace to serve. So the butler says, "Thank you for interpreting my dream such a favorable way. I will remember you when I get out of prison." The dream comes true 3 days later. The butler is released from prison, restored to the palace of the Pharaoh, and he forgets all about Joseph. The other dream is the baker, who was the baker of the residence. The baker dreams a dream, and Joseph interprets it that the baker is going to be hanged. And 3 days later, the baker is hanged. So both of these interpretations come true. Pharaoh has a dream. Pharaoh has a dream that nobody knows how to interpret. So Joseph interprets the dreams. It's the cows and the grain. Did you read that? Okay, so you've got this, it's a sign of plenty, 7 years of plenty, being followed by 7 years of famine. Okay. He helps Pharaoh and says, "Hey, you're going to have 7 years of plenty. Store this stuff up because 7 years of famine are coming." And it happens just as Joseph says, and Joseph is honored now by Pharaoh. Joseph has two sons of his own, Manasseh and Ephraim. So when you look at the map of the 12 tribes that we're going to see in Exodus, you're going to see that Joseph doesn't get a portion of land in the Promised Land, but his sons that are called half-tribes, they get portions, Manasseh and Ephraim. Chapters 42 to 44 is this whole going back and forth to Egypt business. Okay, so this is the scene with the sack of Benjamin. And maybe you remember there was something hidden in the sack of Benjamin. So that's that scene. So we're going to the famine. There's a famine in the land of Canaan. So the brothers are sent down to Egypt to buy grain. Buy grain, bring it back. Jacob sends his sons down there, all but Benjamin. Remember, favorite son? Joseph was the favorite son. He's gone. Benjamin's the favorite son. Why is Benjamin the favorite son? Not just because he's the oldest and he's the son of my old age. Whose mother is he? Rachel. So, and who's Rachel to Jacob? His favorite, the wife he loves. So Benjamin is not allowed to go. All the other sons go there to buy grain. They're accused by Joseph for being spies, and says you can't leave here. You can't leave Egypt because you're spies. We're going to imprison you unless you go back and bring your youngest brother. So he wants to see Benjamin, his full brother, mother and father. And as a hostage, so to speak, Simeon has to stay. Okay, so Simeon has to stay while they go back to Canaan to get Benjamin. Notice there's no reconciliation yet. There's no awareness. They don't know who Joseph is. Joseph knows who they are. But they don't recognize him. They're not expecting to see him, probably because they think he's dead. Joseph gives them grain. He doesn't take the money. He tells the servants, put the money back in their bags, so when they get home, not only do they have the grain, but they have all their money too. So Joseph is really trying to be righteous here. He's really trying to take care of his family, even his family who tried to have him killed. So they go back to Canaan. Chapters 43 and 44, they go back to Egypt, this time with Benjamin. And then there's this whole thing about the deception in the cup. So more deception, more trickery, more treachery. So Joseph has his cup planted in Benjamin's bag against nobody knowing this. So then when they ask him to see their bags before they leave, they see that he's stolen this silver cup from Joseph that they don't know is their brother. And so now he has grounds to keep Benjamin there. Eventually in all of this, we come to 45 and 50. This is Joseph looking like an Egyptian. This is all of his brothers. Joseph reveals who he is. There's a whole lot in there too. Take a look at it again if you didn't notice about Joseph crying, Joseph weeping. Go back and take a look at that again if you didn't catch that. So they go back with Benjamin. There's more deceit. Joseph is made known. Joseph tells them to bring Jacob back, and he settles them in the land of Goshen, which is also known as Ramses. So if you know anything about Exodus at this point, you're going to hear about Goshen again, and you're going to hear about Ramses again. Joseph gives them lots and lots of riches, and it goes on to explain all the things that he gives to them. They come back with Jacob. So Jacob now comes to Egypt. And they give the description of the family members. There's 70 of them. So including Joseph and his family, and the ones that come from Canaan, together there's 70 of them. Now, I'm sorry? Yeah, it's the Murphys. So now, God finally speaks. How many chapters has it been since we've heard God speak? God is speaking. Don't be afraid to go. He tells Jacob, don't be afraid to go to Egypt. I will make you a great nation. There's already a good start on that, right? 12 sons. I will make you a great nation. I will go with you and bring you back again. I will go with you. What's completely gone now that Abram had to deal with? This idea of a God being the God of a place. He's directly telling them, I will go with you. I'm not going to stay in Canaan while you go down to Egypt. I'm going with you to Egypt, and I will bring you back again. Now, he probably doesn't mean exactly Jacob, because we're going to hear in a chapter that Jacob dies. But there's this promise, I will bring you back again. Jacob blesses Pharaoh. We've seen that before, interaction between the sons of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob with Pharaoh. Jacob gives his final words to each son. If you didn't read through that, that's an interesting thing too. It's like his dying testimony to each of the children. I made myself a note to read this one, Genesis 49. Anybody got a Bible open? No? That's all right, I got it here. So Genesis 49. Oh, so this is what he says to Judah. Remember Judah's number 4 son? This is what he says. This might sound familiar to you. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to who it belongs, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. We hear that reading every year in Advent. Guess who it's referring to? Exactly. God gets a couple new nicknames here. He's called the Shepherd. We'll see that again. And the Rock of Israel. Again, when you hear Israel, you can hear Jacob, or you can hear his corporate person. Jacob dies at 147 years old. Joseph promises to bury Jacob in Canaan. What kind of promise again? The thigh promise. Okay. And Sheol is mentioned for the first time. Sheol. Sheol is the place of the dead. So in Hebrew tradition, in the Jewish tradition, what you have is the place of the dead and the place of the damned. Two different things. It's an idea, I think, I'm not sure if it's older in the Jewish tradition or if it's older in the Greek tradition, but the Greek tradition has exactly the same thing. There's the place of the dead and there's the place of the damned. In Hebrew, the Hebrew tradition, it's Sheol and Gehenna. So when you hear Sheol, That's the place of the dead. Jacob talks about going to Sheol, the place of the dead. Okay? Nobody else has really talked about that yet. Gehenna is the place of the damned. Okay, so when you hear Gehenna, think people who are separated from God forever. For the Greeks, it's Hades and Tartarus. If you've studied Greek mythology, you've heard those terms before. Hades is the place of the dead. Tartarus is the place of the damned. All those interesting things like the guy that has to push the rock up the hill every day and then it rolls back down, he has to push it back up again, and he does that for eternity. That's Tartarus. That's the place of the damned. Both of those, interestingly enough, get translated into Latin as infernum. Both of them. So when you hear infernum in Latin, you don't know like Dante's Inferno, if they're talking about the place of the dead or the place of the damned. They use the same word for both. When Latin gets translated into English, we translate them both as hell. So now you know why we say Jesus descended into hell. We're not talking about the hell of the damned. We're not talking about Gehenna. We're not talking about Tartarus. We're talking about the place of the dead, Sheol, or Hades in the Greeks, right? So Jacob talks about going to Sheol, the place of the dead. Why do people have to go to the place of the dead? Because somebody hasn't died on the cross yet. And until Jesus dies on the cross, those people are not redeemed of their sins. So they can't be in eternal communion with God until they're redeemed. Well, they're not redeemed because Jesus hasn't died on the cross yet. So that's where, when you hear Sheol, think the place of the dead. When you hear Sheol, don't think people who are damned. We translate in the Apostles' Creed as hell, but we don't mean there the hell of the damned. We mean the hell of the dead. Okay? So I just thought it was interesting because that was the first time I saw the word Sheol in the text. Joseph forgives his brother. Joseph dies at 110 years old. And Joseph tells his brothers, presumably his brothers and his brothers' descendants, God will deliver you back to Canaan. So when you go there, make sure you bring me with you. Okay? God will deliver you back to Canaan. Make sure you bury me there. Okay. Bob, can you get the lights for us? Thank you, sir. So you have your discussion questions. Have fun.